We turn now to a very troubling situation. We've been talking about it all week, and that is the cold-blooded murder of teenager Treyvon Martin down in Sanford, Florida, by a man who was a member of the local neighborhood watch committee who claims that he shot and killed him in self-defense. We're surprised that this issue, this whole shooting, hasn't gotten more attention. But the first person that I saw to talk about it in the national media was Charles Blow, a visual op-ed writer for the New York Times, and a very powerful piece last Saturday. Charles Blow joins us this morning on our news line. Charles, thank you for your time. Good to have you with us.
I'm glad to be here.
Let me ask you, why do you think there hasn't been more national attention to this incident?
Well, it has picked up steam, I must say that.
It has in the last day or so, right?
Yeah, it has picked up a lot of steam, particularly since some of the 911 tapes were released, and they were released the day that my piece appeared. And before that, there were some people writing about it, but it just didn't have quite as much coverage. And the local paper in Orlando was writing, and the Miami Herald did some really nice work on the piece, and Ta-Nehisi Coates on his blog was doing some really smart writing about this story. But, you know, it's one of those things where there are a lot of stories like this of young minority kids, whether they're either killed or go missing, where we really don't hear very much about those children. And this was one case that was so kind of flagrant in the details that it caught my attention, and I felt like I should take it up.
Well, good for you. And how can Mr. Zimmerman, George Zimmerman, continue to claim that he was acting in self-defense, and the police continue to say there's no evidence that he wasn't?
I don't understand it, quite frankly. To me, they say there is not enough evidence to refute his claim of self-defense. Basically, they're saying that we have to be able to prove that he didn't do what he said he did.
Yeah, shouldn't it be the other way around?
It seems to me, I'm not a lawyer. I am a citizen. I am a father. Seems to me that you have enough evidence with the body that was lowered into the grave on March 3rd of Trayvon Martin that something is wrong, because this kid is dead. This kid was doing absolutely nothing wrong. He was completely unarmed. The only reason that he is dead is because he encountered Mr. Zimmerman, who the police on the 911 tape said for Mr. Zimmerman not to follow. Mr. Zimmerman disobeyed the police on the 911 call and followed the child anyway, encountered the child anyway. There are now new tapes of a young girl who says that she was on the phone with Trayvon Martin when Mr. Zimmerman encountered him. And if you believe what she says, Trayvon was trying to get away from Mr. Zimmerman. He was doing what any kid would do. He had a handful of candy and a soda. There was a strange man following him. He did what my kids would do, which is if there's a stranger following you, try to get away from the stranger because you don't know who that is. And so he was trying to get away from this guy. And
he asked him, didn't he, why are you following me?
He asked, according to the young lady, Trayvon asked, why are you following me? To me, that gives Zimmerman, Zimmerman shouldn't be following him, but now that gives Zimmerman the opportunity to identify himself as an authority figure.
Yeah, right.
And to say, I am the neighborhood watch. I just want to make sure that you're okay and that you belong here. That's what a responsible adult would say to a child.
Yeah.
That is not what Zimmerman does, according to the young lady. According to her, he says, what are you here? And a scuffle breaks out.
Right. Now, again, and I think we have talked about this, and I just want to repeat for all of our listeners that Trayvon Martin did belong there. This was a gated community. He was with his father. They were visiting his father's friend. I mean, he was not some stranger in a neighborhood where he did not belong.
He was right. He was visiting someone. I talked to the family attorney yesterday. It's a gate. There are different kinds of gated communities. Some of them have a manned gate at the front. This one had a keypad. Trayvon went in through the gate with the code. He knew the code. This was where he was staying. He had the code. He went in through the proper way. He walked. It started to rain once he got past the gate, so he ducked under and over, one of these overhanging things, and that's when the Zimmerman says he's acting suspicious. He looks like he's on drugs or whatever is happening. He pulls up his hood because it starts to rain on him.
Right.
There's nothing here that any child wouldn't do.
You can find Charles Blow, of course, in the New York Times every Saturday, and follow him on Twitter, his Twitter handle, @Charles M. Blow. Now, I understand from your Twitter feed that you have talked to to one of his parents, at least, Charles. How is the family dealing with this?
They are really stoic and kind of the models of grace in this. I mean, I talked to his mother, 3 or 4 times at this point, almost every day, every other day at this point. And, it is really, I draw a lot of courage from her behavior because I would be hysterical. I mean, I just can't imagine burying one of my boys. No. And
I'd be a lot more outspoken than they have been. I mean, they've spoken out, but they've been very reasoned, I think, in their comments.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, I think, we really have to grieve for that family, but also, look to them as a model for how to deal with this kind of sorrow and loss.
She has said that her son, I think she or the father have said that their son was killed only because he was black.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
that's the case?
It raises the question, why is Trayvon suspicious to Zimmerman?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because, as I said before, I through all of the details, I cannot find where Trayvon is doing anything that any other child would not do.
And Zimmerman has a history, right, of being suspicious of or worried about or making 911 calls about young black males.
Now, according to news reports, he has called the police 46 times since 2001. 9 of those cases, I think, were something about suspicious people. And I have not been able to identify the race of each of those people who he considers suspicious, but that raises a question. But what is it about Trayvon what his actions that says that this person is behaving suspiciously is the question. And the family believes that what it is the fact that he is a young black male. And there's a point that I think is really important here, Mark, which is that picture that you keep seeing of Trayvon in the burgundy shirt is a very recent picture. Trayvon was killed, I think, 2 or 3 weeks to the day from his birthday. He just turned 17. He's a very young-looking kid in the space. When George Zimmerman encounters Trayvon and speaks to him face to face, when you look into that face, you should have recognized that this is not a man. He has no facial hair. He has no wrinkles. This is a child. And, anybody who's looking at those pictures on television knows that face is not the face of an adult.
New York Times columnist Charles Blow on this Wednesday edition of the Bill Press Show. Charles, I just want to mention, I think you misspoke when you said 46 times since 2001. It's actually 46 times since January 2011.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, 2011.
Right,
I'm sorry.
Right. I just want to be sure that we both cleared the record on that. And finally, I've got to ask you, this does... Well, two questions quickly. One is, I raised this issue with Jay Carney at the White House on Monday. Mm-hmm. And Carney, of course, said we didn't have any comment on it. Later that night, the Justice Department announced, and that's a question I asked Carney, have you asked the Justice Department to get involved in this? They had no comment at the time. Later that night, the Justice Department did, in fact, step in. And I know Eric Holder has now had some personal conversations with the police authorities there. Will this make a difference, you think, in how this case is handled?
Well, I think now the right eyes are on the case, and I think that is a huge step forward. I'm trying my best to give the local police department the benefit of the doubt. There have been cases in the local police department where things were not handled properly in the past. In other cases involving young white men, in two cases, these were children of other officers in attacks on black men. So there is some history there that gives you pause. Mm-hmm. So at least now you know that competent federal people are at least keeping an eye on that, and that, I think, is a giant leap forward. Also, a grand jury has been impaneled
by the state attorney,
case, and that is a huge step forward.
Well, again, you're the one that first sort of wrote about it, Charles. I'm glad that you did, and I'm glad it's finally getting some of the attention it deserves, both in the media and also in the system of justice. Charles Bowe, thanks for your time this morning, Charles, okay? Good to follow you, as always. Sure. You can follow his column on Saturday. Here's what I want to know, and I'm sure you're wondering, too. Why hasn't, now that we know that there's no evidence that Zimmerman acted in self-defense, no way, no how, why the hell hasn't he been arrested? Why haven't charges been filed? And also, why isn't the police chief of Sanford, Florida, the guy who's letting Zimmerman off the hook, don't you think he ought to be arrested as an accessory to murder? 866-55-PRESS.
This is the Bill Press Show. This is Seattle's Progressive Talk, AM 1090. Listen live, anywhere, anytime at am1090seattle.com.